Yeah, I'll record and send. I may need to have somebody else, but it's being recorded right now. Yeah, for Rhonda, I guess I'm not quite sure of her exact schedule, but it might be good to have her be able to access it if she chooses to do so. Okay, so I'm on the cover slide, and Janice probably said it a couple times, but sorry, we were yapping about 15 minutes ago and made some last minute changes. So she sent you one very, 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 very recently with some last minute changes. So if you don't have the last minute changes, I'd say very small problem for now, but just know there was one that we sent that's a little different than the one that was sent, you know, maybe a day or so before that. Okay, there's version 6. Okay. Ooh. Goodness gracious. Okay, so anyway, there's the cover slide. Here's the agenda. I don't think we need to go over this as much, but the same format. There's a little bit of a feeling, you know, like this was kind of where our changes were, but there's a little bit of some things we want to get up front. So like OTAN TDLS, for example, I kind of feel that really belongs more. Sorry, I'm rehashing what Janice and I just talked about. It kind of belongs more in the second section because we've got some web trainings and we got EL Civics and Summer Institute and all kinds of stuff back there. But because it's coming up and it's, you know, like I kind of wanted to get it a little bit up front. Whenever it's buried, nobody remembers to bring it up. So there is a feeling that let's try to bring that one up front, you know, just for a lot of promotional sort of reasons. So I'll stop talking about it, but I will just double check. Does everybody feel like you know what I'm talking about with that?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. All right. Wonderful. And then again, we're sticking with resources, you know, where again, we're having the talking points in the front section. That doesn't mean you can't talk about the resources, but things like the April 30th deliverables, do you really need to read that off? I'd say no. Do you need to dig in the weeds like we have with Census 20? I'd say especially no. A lot of things that you don't need to read off, but you can just point out that there's lots of wonderful information back there if you want to do some more digging. Okay, so moving on, here's the CDE update. Again, this is where I'm not quite final yet. I did submit it to Amokela about 10 days ago. I sent him a reminder yesterday morning. I still haven't gotten a response. We did have a meeting Friday afternoon with a few of us CASAS peeps and Amokela and Carolyn Friday afternoon, so I did mention it. I kind of feel like we just move on. He didn't express any reservations. He did say he received it. I did tell him I was going to nag him again yesterday. All that to say I still haven't gotten a final response. With that, though, we'll just kind of leave it as is and figure we're okay. Again, here's the same timeline. I think I did the cross off here, but I'm not sure, not him. And then I added some things here. To be clear, this is not what he put, but these are things I've had for a while that I added. You know, he doesn't really seem to mind if I prompt that, you know, but this is all valid stuff. You know, but again, I'll just say, because I haven't gotten the final blessing from him, he may choose to edit or delete this or add some things to it. The timeline, kind of same thing. So, just I'll give you my speculation that this, I think he'll leave the same on the slides, but digging in the weeds a little bit, actually, let me just make sure you're all aware that they did send out that application on the website. I don't think they did it on January 21st. I think it was more like the 23rd or 4th that they actually released it, but they did release it, and it is available on the website now. Did you all know that, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, the due date, as far as I know, is unchanged. That continues to be February 28th. However, these other dates, and you don't need to say all this, this is just for your background information, that I do think these other dates after the due date are all going to move back. That is, of course, for the field, the due date is going to stay firm, but for their timeline, they're going to kick the can on all of it. But all that said, My understanding is, you know how they did that demonstrated effectiveness in December. I'll just make sure you all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, they did, from what I understand, alert people right away in early January on that. Mostly they focused, of course, on the ones that were shot down. I know they did get out in front of it early because I got calls early in December from concerned folks that got shot down. From what I understand, when they shot people down in that first leg, everybody had a chance to appeal. Pretty much everyone that got shot down did. So my understanding is they're still not all the way done with those appeals. They're still working on a few, and they're still finalizing a few of those appeals-related decisions. So they will not be, you know, getting some of those final answers out to the appealing agencies until end of this week, per my understanding. So obviously, if they don't get the final decision out till the end of this week, they might give some of those agencies a little bit extra time because they're still in the lurch. They don't know if they're still in the process or shut out. So there will be a few agencies, from my understanding, that may be able to submit a little after this February 28th deadline. To be clear, they're not moving the deadline for everybody, only for perhaps those 2 or 3 agencies that appeal and win the appeal. So because that's still going on, the final deadline for this application might be kicked back a week or so. So because of that, the CDE review may be the second 2 weeks of March instead of the first 2 weeks of March. Because of that, the workforce board review may be the second 2 weeks of March rather than the first 2 weeks of March. Because of that, these other deadlines might be a week or so later than what this table suggests. I wouldn't make a big fuss about that at the meetings, but just know that he might be making edits to that. There may be something that we receive on the final PowerPoint that's different than what you see in front of you. Just also, oh, by the way, if you encounter this from anybody, yes, it's true that my understanding is that this timeline is going to be moved back a little bit. It's not going to be exactly what you see here on this chart. Okie doke.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so moving along here, this is more my handiwork, not his. He seems very amenable to receiving it. If we sort of force feed it, he kind of likes being force fed stuff. So I force fed him this, but this is just simply the link on the CDE website. Here's that FAQ page that you already know about. This final one you may not know about. This you may want to take a look at just for your own edification. But back to this part, sorry, I'm acting like Quizmaster, but did you all know that there's a local workforce board review that's built into this WIOA 2 application process? Yes or no?
No.
Yes.
Okay, mixed answers there. So anyway, now that we're in WIA, it's required by federal law that the workforce boards get to review 100% of those WIOA 2 applications. So simultaneous to the time CDE does the review you'd expect, it's passing along to all the workforce boards. So again, all the agencies here in San Diego will be reviewed by the San Diego workforce boards. All the ones in Sacramento County will be reviewed by SETA. All of LAUSD and LACCD will be reviewed by the city of LA, and so on. So again, they'll basically siphon it off to the WIB that's responsible for the region in which that applicant dwells. So all of those, so workforce boards will get a chance to review. So again, tentatively, that's the first 2 weeks of March at the same time CDE reviews. So this link here on the third bullet is EDD has worked with the CDE. They've dutifully come up with some very specific guidelines for the local workforce boards. So the local workforce boards know exactly what they need to do because they can go to this directive and read it. So if any agency kind of wants to know what their workforce board is doing, out of obvious potential distrust issues, they can find out the beginning, middle, and end of what they're going to be doing by going to this EDD directive and finding out exactly what EDD is telling the local workforce boards to do. That is in this 19-26. So they've dutifully already put out written guidance on exactly what every workforce board will and will not be required to do in this process. So I do think it's a useful link just to dispel any lack of trust that might occur due to that extra step. Okie doke.
Yep.
Okay.
Okey doke.
Then this update, I'll just say they brought up that they really want to reinforce barriers. I've left it here as a placeholder because when I did the training up there on the 21st, Carolyn, Corey, and Amukelu were all saying they've been working more on barriers. You know, there's a couple new things they're going to be doing where they're going to be even more relevant. I think it's going to relate to some of that Perkins stuff that they're doing. I'll just say the update on Friday was, yes, they're still doing this, but we agreed it may be more relevant for the March PowerPoint than February. So I think the likely outcome is this will be deleted for February, but I'm leaving it here because I'm kind of letting Amukela have final say so, but my guess is it will be over. Okay, and I think that's good. So here's one where I already know, Janice, that we need to update where you can see our agenda on this one doesn't match slide 2, so we'll update it. But again, it needs to be the same 4 bullets we have in monthly topics here. Not a biggie, but that is data portal, NRS tables, WIOA statewide, and OTAN symposium. We'll just have that match. But without further ado, we'll jump into the data portal. So we all know that the data portal is up and running and has been since the beginning of January, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, and it's up and running is the wrong word. It's obviously always been up and running, but by up and running, I mean it's just updated to include the data from the 1819 submission. So here's the link, and here's the cover slide that's just showing all that wonderful information on where you can access it. I kind of feel like a picture is worth 1,000 words here, but I'll just say, is there any pushback on that? I think this is the best way to do it, but I'll open it for comment if you think there's any words we need to add, but I don't think there is. Anybody have any opinion on whether it should stay like this or whether we need to add any text here?
I think it's better to leave it the way it is.
Okay. Yeah, I kind of like it the way we have it too, but just checking. That was, you know, good room for whatever. Okay, so now we're moving in. So you click that first link. So again, you can look at performance data and you can look at persistence data. So here's the obvious screenshot where we're looking at table 4, looking at the basic screenshot. This is where you'll go. So again, you've got those 3 little areas. Obviously, you start with the one that's called Start Here. So here's what you can find under Start Here. Again, it's pretty obvious where you start just because it's labeled that way. So in any case, you start here. And so what we tried to do here is just label a little bit all of these detail-oriented items to just kind of show what they all mean. Some of them, like county, pretty darn obvious, but some of them, like geographic region, could mean a lot of things. Provider type could mean a lot of things. So we just tried to define what some of these things mean. You know, again, most of these I really kind of feel like are self-explanatory, but not all of them are. Some people get a little befuddled by the titles, so a little bit of a blurb next to each one to let everybody know what all the possibilities are when you click that drop box called Start Here.
Jay?
So you start, yes, please.
Can we go back a slide? There was a little
Yes,
note
you
at the
can.
bottom that I didn't understand, something about new columns. That's in your notes underneath the
Says
slide.
11 to 14 CD area.
That, Janice, I'm not really sure. That's not my note.
We had originally talked when the new data came out that had 1819 in it, if there were going to be an increase from the number of columns, which we had was 11, and the count now is 13. And so that's a brain jiggler for me to remember to ask you, did they change it, or is this what it's always like?
I don't think so, no. It should be the same.
Okay, let me take the
I'm
comment
not
out.
sure why it would be
Okay.
13. I think what you're getting at is this.
Well, you can.
I would not talk about this because this seems destined to create way more confusion than it will help. But I think what you're getting at is on the ABE side now, on the federal tables, with all the CCRS stuff, there are different titles for the different levels for math than there are for reading. So there's theoretically different levels, but in TE, we roll them all up to just say ABE 1 to 6. On the NRS tables, you know, for some of the issues with reading tests and math tests, it matters. But at the end of the day, on table 4, it totally does not matter. The feds are still looking at ABE 1 to 6. So it just rolls up a little bit differently now for reading than it does for math. But again, on table 4, it's just ABE 1 through ABE 6. So the data portal obviously matches the way table 4 has it exactly, which is to say it purposefully goes out of its way to ignore all that stuff, because for federal reporting, we still need the same way we've always done it.
Okay.
Jay,
So I think that's what you mean. There may be something else you mean, but I'm not sure what on earth it would be other than that. I'll just say to my knowledge, there's nothing else that would have been added or subtracted to that. The levels are the same. There's differences because of POPs and all that, but no differences related to the levels themselves.
Jay, can you go back to the CASAS data portal?
This one?
Yes, under
slide
enrollment
number?
size, groups into small, medium, and large. What are the population differences on that?
Let me just take a quick look. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, I can add that. Would it help you if you had that on the slide? If you're saying yes, I'd say fine. It'll be easy to add. I'm fine with adding it. Just making sure that's what you're asking, I guess, more than anything.
That's what I'm
But
asking.
sorry, I'm going to have to select it to remind myself. So hang on. A picture is worth 1,000 words on this one, I think. Hang on, sorry.
They have
I'm going to
6
do a
categories.
new share. Hang on. So here, you should all be able to see my screen now, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so here you go.
Okay.
This is it.
Okay, perfect.
So we've got these categories. We've had it this way for a long time. I can't remember the rationale, but this is the way we've had it for a long time.
Okay, that's what I need. I had used it, and then I haven't used it when it's this way for a long time.
Okay, one key thing that does come up with this isn't anything I've encountered recently, but back in the good old days I did, is it's based on WIOA enrollment, not total enrollment. So a lot of schools probably in their mind of minds think they're bigger than 8,000. But if you base it on WIOA enrollment, that number dwindles quite a bit.
Oh, good.
A lot.
No.
Right. Because many schools are bigger than 8,000, but if you base it on WIOA, maybe not nearly as many as people think. So to the naked eye, some people could see these categories and feel like we're kind of pandering to small fries, you might say, but it really is a decent breakdown. It's just because it's based on WIOA enrollment, not overall.
Thank you.
Okay, good question. Okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to bounce back to the PowerPoint, though. Okay, so anyway, so here's where the categories you can start with. So again, which one you said, I didn't want to get into this much detail, but obviously if you select county, the second drop box will give you the 58 counties. If you select provider types, it'll give you the 6 provider types. If you select size, it'll give you those, 6 or 7 categories we just reviewed. So I didn't get into all that, but obviously refine your search is totally based on which category you select to start. And then we've got program years dating all the way back to 0405. It does force you to select all 3, but once you do, you click submit, and obviously that's what makes your data magically appear. So now we're doing NRS performance data from table 4. So here's our nifty little example. You know, again, you can do table 4 here, or you can select table 4B. That depends on what you select on the previous screen. This example on the screen is table 4. I've got to say the overwhelming majority of times you're going to want to look at table 4, not 4B, because table 4 is where we need to select our goals for the feds. So that's the example we selected right here. The one question that kind of comes up, as you can see, we've got our goals for 1920 and 1819, but we only have the average for 1819, with the obvious explanation there is we're not done with 1920 yet. We have no idea what our average will be until the end of the year, but I'll just say that is a common question where people wonder why we've got 2 years on one, but only 1 year on the other. It's a little bit like answering who's buried in Grant's tomb here, but I'll just reiterate that this is the most common question that tends to come up here when you look at goals and averages. So any questions on this? Okay, then moving on to the next slide, this is looking at the same information. We did a little different example where we did a county instead of an agency this time, just to mix it up and be cute. But this time we did it on Persister, not performance. And then the similar question here with Persister is, people ask, why is our persistence information more limited than our performance? And that's simply because we're not required to have any goals related to persistence. That's all related to performance. So on the Persister side, we only have the average because that's the only thing we have available here. And that's a similar, yes, go ahead.
There's one of the numbers in that column under beginning basic, it says 130%. Can that be right? Under ABE beginning basic?
No, it can't. It's under the averages. It's not from the data either. Hang on, let me look. Let me see how it looks right now.
Because I ran it and I got the same thing.
Yeah, 131%.
Okay, yeah, that's a note to Deb and Anthony, I guess. Can you elbow me in the ribs on that one just so I remember to say that?
Yep.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that before. I've got to say that's got to be a website glitch, not an agency data glitch. Yeah, I don't know how on earth we'd have 130, how we'd have 131%. There could be a POPs related issue that kind of has that, but we've got a little mechanism to avoid that. But so yeah, that's got to be a glitch. Sorry.
All right, no worries.
Okay, so moving on, this is kind of bouncing back to persistence. So Janice pointed this out, that we went to persistence and back to and then back to performance again. This is a little bit on purpose, just because I wanted to save some of the weedy issues for last. But again, we're displaying the agency, so we're just showing how we've got the 12 levels, that we can keep adding more rows, so we can add many years on one screen if we want. We can have many different agencies on one screen if we want. And then we're also using this to answer the single most frequently asked question, which is, what are those numbers in parentheses? That's the total number. So in this example, you can see, you know, the ABE beginning lit, there's only 15 students. So that's great, but that may suggest that that data is a lot less meaningful than the higher levels of ESL, where we've got 278 students. Again, the higher that number in parentheses, the more valid, the more significant, the more urgent that data probably is to your agency. So I'll just say, is everybody clear on all this nifty data portal stuff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So we'll move on here. So we're going to just do a quick review of Table 4, 4B, and Persister. We've talked about this before, obviously, but I will say the number of questions has kind of come up. I kind of feel like for about a year or two, NRS kind of got, short shrift, sort of disappeared from consciousness. I would say mostly just because we were focused on things like the survey and, like CAPE data and so on. Lots of, IET, lots of new stuff that's kind of come up that's kind of stolen the NRS thunder, so to speak. But now that all those things I've mentioned has kind of subsided a little bit, that is, the surveys subsided, IET subsided, the CAPE issues have subsided. So I kind of feel like now people have kind of gotten back to basic table 4.4b stuff. So that's one reason why it seemed like a good time to bring this back. The other more obvious reason, of course, is that the data portal is all about what's directly on your table 4, what's directly on your 4B, and what's directly on your persister. So obviously that means it's probably a good time to review here. So here's our table 4 review. So in short, I guess I'll just say, do you feel like you know the basics of table 4, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If you want to chat rather than talk, that's fine. So everybody does, so everybody knows about qualifying pretest and everybody knows how to use pre-post gains to calculate, that column E where we're, the column I where we're calculating the percentages for each of those 12 levels. Just making sure everybody's saying yes to that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's just hard to see it on the slide.
Okay. Well, I don't think you need to be able to rattle off these exact percentages here, but you just need the shot to show we've got the 12 levels. We're calculating the number of participants based on that qualifying pretest. We're calculating the number who make a gain in column E based on pre-post gains. And then column I is simply column E divided by column B. That is, of those that qualify, this is the percentage that progress a level. One thing that's, I wouldn't get into all the weedier stuff here, but it is worth mentioning that we've got this column F where we've got high school diploma and high school equivalency. And we also, in the name here, don't worry about this for your group, I guess, but I will point out that in column E, there's kind of a long-winded title for column E, which I'll say is 100% on purpose, where we're looking at that high school credits issue. There's issues with post-secondary that can also technically give the person a level gain. I wouldn't worry about getting into the weeds on all that, but I do think it's useful to point out here that under WIOA, there are ways in which a student can make a level gain or gain a functioning level, you might say, for reasons beyond just pre and post testing. So the part that I do think is worth pointing out is this, to keep it basic, is that when we were in WIA, when we were talking about level gain, we were pretty much exclusively talking about pre-post test gains. In WIOA, pre-post testing is still by far the #1 area that contributes to this, but it's not all about pre and post testing anymore. We've got HSC and high school diploma in column F. In addition to that, we've got that high school credits and some post-secondary issues that can also theoretically contribute to those gains. So it's important just to point out that there are ways in which learners can show up on table 4 and positively show as making an educational functioning level gain that may not necessarily have anything to do with pre and post testing anymore. I don't think it's important to get in the weeds with all that, but it is important to just point out that it's not all about pre and post testing anymore. Now that we're in WIOA, those measurable skills gains are a little more broadly based than what they were under WIA. So I'll stop talking about it, but just verify that you know what I'm talking about. And I'll also just kind of make sure that that hits the sweet spot where it's still comfortable and you're not feeling like it's too little or too much, or too little or too much.
So Jay, it's Margaret.
Yeah.
You said high school credits. I get that. What else can contribute to that?
So you've got the HSC and high school diploma, which will kind of, you know, either or. It's not both, but it's either or, where if they get a high school diploma, that can also count here. I think usually it'll just do level gains. The only high school diplomas that show up on column F are for those that did not make a level gain. So if the student completes a level and gets the diploma, it'll show up in column E but not F. But if you've got some of those other learners that get a diploma but don't make a level gain, then they'll show up in column F, so you will have those additional issues. The high school credits you mentioned is another good example. To be clear, that shows up in column E. That's another either or, but you can't really tell just by looking at table 4, you know, whether that's a high school credits gain or a pre-post gain.
Okay.
The other one that you know the least about, and the reason why nobody knows this one as much, is because it's not a payment point. It's not a payment point because there's really no way to verify any of this except through that data match, which we already know is way too little, way too late. But technically for table 4, there's ways they can complete a level by entering post-secondary, entering college. There's literally no way we can data match that. So CDE decided long ago that we're not going to go there. That's just a dumb idea to factor into payment points. So we never really talk about it because it's not a payment point, and it does kind of inflate table 4 outcomes. In our mind of minds, we don't feel that bad about inflating table 4, but for payment points, when it comes to money, we do. So we kind of go way out of our way to underplay that, and we also go way out of our way to make sure that will never count for payment points.
All right. So we don't need to mention that one.
Right. I wouldn't get into that at all. Okay. But I would get into that more basic fact that, you know, it's not all about pre and post testing anymore, that there are other issues that can factor positively to give you a better level completion. So a lot of times if agencies dig in the weeds and they try to make it all match up, it may not all match up. And one good reason why is there's things like HSC, diploma, high school credits, and post-secondary that could potentially show up as a positive outcome here, but will not necessarily be that intuitive if you dig deep. Okay, I'll stop there. Does that hit the sweet spot, or does it leave it a little bit funky?
I think it's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we'll say it's the sweet spot. Do bring up that the numbers won't always add up if you do it to the nth degree. Somebody brought this up as a question, quite frankly, a week ago. And so it did get me thinking, you know, I knew all this, but I hadn't really thought about how when we get into things like NRS performance goals, the numbers don't line up all neat and tidy now that we're in WIOA like it always used to when we did this stuff for WIA. So because of that, I felt the need to kind of backpedal a little bit and make sure everybody realizes that there's issues here. So anyway, the other one is POPs. We're not using this as a big POP session, but I'll just say because it's here and I don't want to cut it off and pretend like it doesn't exist, I do feel like, you know, we need to keep the screenshot in toto. I don't think we want to spend a lot of time talking about POPs or we'll go off the rails, but I do think it's good for you to remind everybody that POPs exist. This is where they affect, and then just mention we all know about the 90-day rule and how important that is. I'll just say I have done this review a few times now in the last couple weeks, and everybody does conveniently say yes. So hopefully that's how it will be for you. I'll just say, does that sound about right for POPs, or do you want to do more on this, or do you want to do less on this?
No one wants to say. It's fine just to talk about it. briefly.
Because I do think it's important that, yes, you do mention them, but I don't think it's important at all that you do any more than that. It's good to mention them and just make sure that everybody knows what you're talking about. I do feel pretty good about the fact that just about everybody does know what you're talking about now when you mention POPs in general. Does that mean everybody's ready to pass the quiz? Maybe not. But does everybody know they exist? Does everybody know they're governed by attendance? And does everybody know that that 90-day rule is important? I do think everybody does know those basic facts. As long as everybody knows that, I think best to move on and not get in the weeds on POPs. But it's hard to ignore them. Okay, so moving on, here's a little bit why I fussed about what I just did for the last 5 or 10 minutes, is moving on to 4B. So the short answer is the same as the short answer we've had for 20 years, where 4 includes everybody who qualifies for WIOA. 4B only includes those with the pre and post. So that basic definition is 100% true. But what happens is when you look at the numbers for 4B, there's reasons that extend beyond just who has a pre-test and who has a post-test that accounts for the different numbers in 4B than what you have in 4. Number one is you do have POPs. So for some agencies, that could mean you've got a bigger number in 4B. For some agencies, that could mean you have a smaller number in 4B. If you pre and post tested the student 2 or 3 different times in the program year so that they have a pre and post for every POP, well then the 4B numbers could actually be higher than the table 4 numbers. If you only have one pre-post pair and you unwittingly created a lot of POPs without it, well then your 4B numbers will be smaller than your numbers on 4. I'll just say, does everybody follow me on that explanation here?
It's Janice. That was news to me, which is why I put that question in the bottom. You know, is 4B a subset of 4? And the answer is no. The answer is that.
Well, it is in terms of pre and post testing. When you just apply the basic definition, the answer is yes. We're just like we've had every year since 1999. 4B continues to be that subset of individuals on table 4 that have the pre-post pair. But once you throw POPs in there, then yeah, you're right. Then usually it'll be a smaller number, but theoretically you could have a bigger number if you've dutifully done a pre-post pay. If you've got a lot of students with multiple POPs and you've dutifully made sure that you've got a pre-post pair for every single POP that was created for every single student.
So in 4B, multiple POPs are only counted once?
No, they could be counted twice, where if, like, let's say that I've got April, you know, I don't think we want to go this far, but just so we're all clear, if I have a POP in August, September, October, then I have another POP in April, May, June, and I've dutifully pre-tested in August, post-tested in October, and I've dutifully pre-tested in April, post-tested in June, well, then I might count twice on 4B because that has me counting 2 times under POPs. But if I only have one pre-post, which is way more common, then I'm only going to show up one time.
So it might be twice in 4B, but only once on 4.
Right, theoretically. But again, that's going to be a rarity. Again, I don't think you want to go that far into it, but I just want to point out that, yes, it's possible for that to go both ways due to some of those examples that are a little wacky, but certainly possible.
But there wouldn't be twice. They wouldn't be duplicated in column D, right?
Right.
Okay.
Well, they could be, like if I make a 20-point gain from August to October, and then I also make a 20-point gain from, you know, April to June, then yeah, I could be counted twice. Because it's just looking at pre and post testing. Right. So then the other issue here is back to your question about the other MSGs, is that's the other reason why it gets murky, is that you know you've got some bean counters out there that really dig into these numbers. This is actually, I think, what trips people up way more often than what I just said, where Table 4 is looking at high school credits, Table 4 is looking at high school diploma and HSE. Table 4B, because it's only worried about pre and post testing, completely ignores all those other MSGs. It only looks at pre and post testing. So if you've got a lot of students that completed a level based on high school credits, post-secondary, HSE, or high school diploma, it's going to be completely knocked out here on 4B, because 4B is all about who has a pre and post. So it likewise only looks at gains related to pre and post. So some of the bean counters that you know exist out there have done some of the bean counting and pointed out that, yeah, the bean counting doesn't add up. That's the bottom line why. So I wouldn't get into that too much, but it is good to have in your holster, because I do see it as being possible that you'll have a bean counter or two that asks you that question. So that's just so you have it in your holster and in case you need to deal with the bean counters in some way.
Okay, it's good to know.
Does everybody follow that line of logic?
That's clear, Jay, but could you answer the second question that she has about ABE level 1 showing 6 students on 4B and none on 4?
I looked at that and I realized there's 2 different reports. The report for 4B is dated December the 12th, and the one on the preceding slide was from August. It's too small to see. So
that one made
right, and some of this is just some of these, the Rolling Hills data we have now is garbage. So some of these I intentionally left as is, because when I ran the Rolling Hills the way it is now, it just had garbage data. So I'm not really trying to get anybody to trail it here. You know, again, if you make a big effort to trail it for the reasons I just gave you, you're going to be underwhelmed even if you trail it. So quite frankly, even if it was all the same, it would be not 100%, but it would be 99.9% fruitless to try to follow the numbers. And I just gave you 3 reasons at least why that's a largely fruitless endeavor at this point.
Thank you.
I'm going to delete that line, and I'm going to add the notes about this rarity about the 2 pops, and I'll put that in the notes for the next one.
Right, and yeah, you're right. The 2 pops shouldn't happen much, but the issue with HSE and high school credits and all that stuff is pretty common. That's why these numbers are never going to add up exactly the way you're seeing them on table 4. And I'll just say, so I'm going to pick on UK because I know you were in the mix where you were like an NRS Performance Goals cheerleader back when we did this the last time around 10 years ago, that you remember when we did these exercises all the time 10 or 12 years ago. The beauty of it is the numbers always added up very easily because of all these other issues. The concept is still the same, but if you take that extra step to expect the numbers to all add up seamlessly, they rarely, if ever, do. And I just got through explaining why that's true.
Yeah, I understand. It's interesting because the high school, the secondary is a factor that wasn't a part of it in the past. So
right.
Thank you.
So we've gotten it. We've had a lot of reasons why this is a good thing, and that like you might remember in cohorts, we had a lot of those strings attached to HSE and high school diploma outcomes for NRS and payment points. We got rid of just about all of them now because we don't have to tie HSE and high school diploma to table 5 anymore. So the areas in which that's beneficial is greater, but this is the area where it's maybe more problematic because we're factoring it into table 4. So because we're factoring that in, the numbers don't really add up anymore. Anyway, I'll stop. And move on to 16. So here's the persister. I truncated this on purpose. If you limit the view to the persister to just column A, B, C, and D, everything is the same as always. If you go into those right-hand columns where you get into percentage completing table 4 and compare it to percentage completing 4B, then it rears its ugly head and the numbers don't add up. So I'm just leaving it to the simple part of the persister, because if you leave it this way, it should pretty much add up and be all neat and tidy the way we remember it from the good old days. But again, The persister is simply of those who qualify for Table 4, what percentage also qualify for 4B. That is, what percentage of students persist long enough to have a pre-test and a post-test. That gives us our percentage of persister. And as we know, that's beneficial for many, many, many things.
I think this is something that really needs to be accentuated when we're talking about it, because I think that, you know, that answers a lot of the questions that new agencies have where they don't understand the critical importance of managing getting a post-test.
Yes. Yes. Good. Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll just say, Kay, if you have anything like that for notes, maybe Janice and Kay, you could work on just adding a little blurb like that.
Sure.
Does that seem constructive or not so much? Okay, because yeah, I agree with that, and I'll just say, I'll move to the next slide. This is kind of why I would agree, because yeah, there's a little bit of method to the madness, a little bit what you just said, Kay, a little bit all these extra little habit trail comments I'm making and making a short story long, is that part of adding this review is obviously we're doing data portal, so it makes sense to do a little NRS review, because if you don't understand NRS, how the heck are you going to understand the data portal? So similarly, there's been a lot of talk on performance goals lately. Making a really long story short, we had our last PET meeting in mid-November. There was a big discussion about performance goals. You might say in the believe it or not category, and this is 100% true, it was not a CASAS initiative. Of course, CASAS thinks this is a great idea, but no, it was not our idea. It was definitely not CDE's idea either. It came from the field, specifically Jody Slider and Steve Curiel and Carlos and Laura from LAUSD. They all thought this was something people should be doing more, not less. So CDE dutifully said, yeah, we hear you, and CASAS dutifully said, yeah, we hear you. So we're going to move forward on this more. So we're not going to dig into performance goals in this PowerPoint, but we are going to use this NRS review as a little bit of a teaser to say, yeah, now that we're looking at the data portal and now we're doing a review of the NRS basics, we are going to use this as a stepping stone to next month when we're going to talk a little bit more about NRS performance goals. I'll just say, does that at least make sense? I don't think you need to say any more than that, but I do think it's a good idea to put this teaser slide here so everybody knows to expect that here. And we'll build a little bit in March, then we'll build a little bit more in April, then we'll probably build a little bit more in May.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
So then that segues to the big picture, where another review here is WIOA. So this one also relates a little bit to NRS performance goals, because you can, you know, swing it in lots of different ways with doing that. It also is here because of that application, back to that, hey, your WIOA partners review your application. So there's some thinking that, hey, everybody's going to deal with that. Everybody's going to be rusty on what the heck your local, you know, workforce development board is and so on. So let's go ahead and review a little bit of WIOA 101 here, so everybody kind of understands how that application works and kind of feel like it'll be beneficial for performance goals as well. So does everybody know the 4 title numbers? And I'll just say a little cutesy here, but does everybody also remember this nifty little slide? This is a slide that showed that I presented gazillions and gazillions of times in late 2015 and pretty much all of 2016 when we were ramping up to WIOA. This is just the same slide with the CDE logo on it, is all it is. Any questions on this content?
Yep.
Sorry. Did I miss one? I might have talked over somebody. No, we're all good on this?
I'm good.
Okay.
That's good. Thank you.
So we'll move along here and just say we've got California Workforce Development Board versus EDD. The temptation here is to assign it by Title 1 and 3, which is not exactly right. The short answer is CWDB and EDD both relate to Title 1, and they also both relate to Title 3. Title 3 is basically short-term workforce. Title 1 is long-term. Both of those title numbers relate to both of these. What I would say is CWDB is kind of the administrative arm, where they're the statewide policy arm. For example, they're the ones that recently drafted that state plan update that was posted on the website, there a month ago. They're also responsible for the administration of the 45 local workforce development boards. So all of the, you might say, administrative type stuff is CWDB. On the other hand, if you get into the hardcore sausage grinding, that's all EDD. The policies related to what you're allowed to do for workforce, what are employers allowed to do, what are employees allowed to do, who's running the CalJobs database and producing those reports to the state and the feds all the time. Where do 98% of the bureaucrats work? The answer is at EDD. EDD is the core sausage grinding. CWDB is more the higher level. How are we going to manage state policy, and how are we arranging everything all nicely so we have those nifty 45 state local workforce development boards? Does everybody feel like you know enough to present the difference here?
I think so.
Okay, so again, there's that one, and then here's the workforce development boards. There used to be 49 at the start of WIOA. It's whittled to 45, but again, there's a workforce development board in each region statewide. Each board manages the activities for the local region, and again, all four title numbers are basically going to these board meetings. Again, each local region is responsible for playing in the sandbox with each other. The ultimate authority in each local region for orchestrating it at the local level is that local workforce development board. And then here's the map. You can see, like in the far north, they've kind of, bunched some of them together. Here's the link if anybody's interested in the local map. I don't think you need to get into that so much. But here is the nifty little map if you want to present it. So I'll just say, any questions about the WIOA title numbers, CWDB, EDD, or the local workforce boards? So again, you can see the way it will work for the WIOA application is you see how San Diego is all of San Diego County. So we in San Diego are easy. We're very straightforward. If you're in San Diego County, 100% of the responsibility is San Diego Workforce Development Board. So thereby, all of the WIOA 2 agencies in San Diego County will be reviewed by the San Diego Board. All of the ones in Riverside will be reviewed by the Riverside Board, and so on.
Hey, this is Jen.
Okay.
So let me see if I got it.
Yeah.
Hello. If I got this straight, so the agencies that are working on the new RFA submission, that there's a slot in there where they're supposed to define how they're partnering, and this is some things they need to chunk into that section of the RFA.
Yes, so once CDE receives all the applications, there'll be a folder where they can review them. Again, it will be sort of parceled off depending on who your local region is. So no, you won't pass through all the local workforce boards. It'll be by region. So the 8 or 10 WIOA 2 agencies in San Diego will be reviewed by the San Diego Workforce Board. The 3 or 4 agencies in Imperial County will be reviewed by the Imperial Workforce Board, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Jay, I think the question is, when filling in the application and it asks for definition of local partners, agencies, it would include their workforce board as a local partner.
Yes, they sure would. They sure would. So yeah, if they need a cheat sheet, then this could be, this is mostly just to help them understand how this WIOA 1 system works, so to speak. But yes, it could be a little cheat sheet where, hey, maybe they don't feel like they've done as much as they should. Well, they could go to this link and find out where in their local region they might need to look it up and find out a little more information. If so, this certainly would be a way where they could get exactly that.
Great, that'll be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, and Janice notes this is a big kind of leap. There's no connection here at all other than we're just sort of rounding out things that we kind of feel like need a little extra attention. So this is the OTAN Symposium. Netta made a nice slide with some extra information on it. So again, we're just bringing it up here. Again, it's a great event. It always gets a little bit underattended. I always like to say, if you bring this up, very few people raise their hand, but you bring up the Summer Institute, obviously everybody raises their hand. It's kind of unfair because the only difference is we're overwhelmingly more expensive than they are. But just like you can learn everything you want to know about CASAS and more at the Summer Institute, you can kind of learn everything you wanted to know about OTAN and more at this thing, but nobody ever goes. But anyway, this is a great event, so we're bringing it, trying to give it, higher billing to get people to be aware of it, etc. Then census, a couple key things, the same slides. I don't think we need to talk about this. These are Pete and repeats from last month. I found out at CAIA the rubber meets the road in April, so I'll just keep this month and next month, and then in April, we'll probably move it all to the back of the PowerPoint. Okay, then resources, again, deliverables we emphasized in January, but now we don't really have any deliverables till April, so we'll definitely move all that to the back. We have all that obnoxiously detailed stuff on the census that we moved to the back, all the stuff related to conferences and web trainings to the back. So here's deliverables, a bunch of stuff on the census, co-ops, EL Civics Conferences. Lynn, did you want to say anything about this? Lynn made some last minute updates here. I can hear you, Lynn, but can anybody hear Lynn?
No.
No.
Because I can hear her, but I can hear her because she's talking down the hallway. I can't hear her.
Okay.
Hang on, Lynn.
Let me try. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I got it. Okay.
We can hear Jay down the hall now.
Yeah, our offices are next door to each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I knew she was talking about it. She was taking the cue quite quickly. But
I was waiting for it. We have added registration will close for Orange February 13th and for San Jose the 4th. People are taken by surprise if we close early, especially if the numbers aren't there, but we have to. We have to get a head count for food, etc. So please tell them, register early. These are closure dates, and if they send in a PO, they should not wait for their district to pay it. They should let us know who they want to send. They aren't doing that, and the districts, go 6 weeks without paying, and they show up at the door thinking they're paid. So did I make sense?
Yes.
Good.
yeah.
I rest my case.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions there? I think we're all right. Here's some more details. Web trainings, like we said, one thing that I'll try to add before posting is what this is missing is I do need to identify a makeup date in late February for agencies that missed the accountability for the CDE training requirement.
Thank you, Jay.
I'm kind of waiting to hear back from CDE before I finalize or identify a date, but I'm hoping we can kind of work that out in the next day or two and identify a date. If we're able to do that in the next day or two, I will add that date to this slide. As it is now, again, January, we're focused on all the trainings that meet the CDE requirement. Now January's in the rear view mirror, so you can see we're focusing on NRS. These are the dates, and we're focusing on the survey. Here's the dates for that. Not on the slide, but if you want to say more, we haven't posted yet, but we'll start just like we're doing with these monthly PowerPoint slides, we're going to start moving into NRS performance goals and probably doing a couple web trainings on that later on in March.
I know that I have several agencies that are have not met requirements. So as soon as we get that information, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, it'll be sometime probably between February 19th and February 25th. It'll be in that window. I think we're going to need to get it done by the end of February. I don't see any way, though, that it'll work having us do it until after President's Day, just because we're going to need to get the word out a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then events, I think we're kind of good here. National conference is good there. A little bit more on the Summer Institute. It's still a ways away. I did send something to the SI team asking them if they wanted to make a plug. I received no response, so I'm just going to stick with this generic slide for now. And then reports. Janice, did you want to, I think I came up with the idea for which reports. I'll just say, though, these slides are a combination of Margaret and Janice. Did you want to say anything about this, or did you just want me to keep babbling?
Keep going.
You can keep going.
So here's the menu for where they're located. One thing I wonder about this, Janice, though, is it has the CDE in it. I think you might be logged in higher level. I'm literally noticing this now. When you sent it to me earlier, I did not notice it at all. It's literally in the last 10 seconds I'm noticing this. But I think any user won't see that CDE option.
Yeah, it's got the consortium manager reports enabled. I can redo that one.
Right.
Yep, let me redo that one.
Okay, I mean, not a tremendous big deal, but anyway. So anyway, this is just showing people where to find them. So we're going to talk about the AA summary and AA detail. Here is that additional assessment summary. All this does, as you can see, it's organized by 231 and 243. That's something I would really emphasize, is that this is like not that new, but it's new within the last year. Last year, there was a lot of grumbling about these reports. One area of legitimate grumbling is that that we didn't really have a good way to get the crowbar out and figure out which were going into the 231 area versus which ones were going into 243. Now you can see we clearly have that itemized out. 231 to the left, 243 to the right. SIT, is over there all the way to the right. So again, this is just giving by class. The T stands for taken. That's not intuitive at all, but just so you know, T is for taken, P is for passed. So again, that just gives you a synopsis by class on how all this goes. Here's Margaret's little checklist. Again, correct category. Again, look at the numbers. I think this is self-explanatory here. I kind of feel like Margaret is just reiterating what I just said in a slightly different way of voicing it. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Anyway, so Margaret, did you have anything you wanted to add here?
Do we want to have a sample of the assessment summary that has both 231 and 243?
I guess we could do that. Yeah.
231 and citizenship.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I don't know if there's another campus that hasn't. But okay.
Right. No, we can try it. I guess that's just Rolling Hills being Rolling Hills.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was slide 41.
Yeah, slide 41.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. 42. I think I synopsized what you said, but if you beg to differ, feel free to do so.
It's just questions to ask. How do you go through this report?
Yeah. Okay, and then what I'll just say is I kind of think, more time will be spent on the detail. I'll just say for my 2 cents, the detail is the more useful of the two, because that's where you're getting in the weeds and looking by student. I'll just say I get probably 10 questions on the detail for every 1 question I get on the summary, because here's where people really get into it. I'll just add again, It gives you 231 to the left and 243 to the right. It gives you each additional assessment by student. Again, T is for taken, P is for passed. You can see it will give you the number. I'm trying to see, is there one in my, I don't see one where anybody did two. I thought I had one before, but it's all right. But it'll just show you the number of times. So like if Timothy attempted the 11C twice and passed, it would just show that he took it twice before he passed, as opposed to showing that he passed it on the first time. But it gives you the number, whether they passed or not. It'll be Y if they did. It'll just be blank. So you can see on Helica at the top, did not pass, so that's why she's scratched out. So the big thing that comes up for this more than anything else, I would say, is why do students get scratched out here? So a couple of the reasons are really obvious, a couple are not. So I'm going to go from most obvious to least obvious. The most obvious is the one I just brought up, where if they didn't pass, if you see Jane Abdo down here, you can see she took the 40C, but she did not pass. So obviously she's going to be scratched out because she didn't pass. I think everybody sees that one pretty easily, right?
Right, that's 15A, right?
Well, yeah, or just she didn't pass. You don't even need to say that. You can just say, well, she didn't pass, so she's scratched off. So the next one is a drop reason. So there's a few. I don't know if there's a good example here, or I'm not finding one where somebody is knocked out because of drop reason. But you could sort of say, yeah, that's 15A, although I would argue the much more obvious reason for Jane is that she didn't pass. But like if Canali up here above Jane, had passed a co-op, Canali still would have been scratched out because of drop reason 15B, incomplete outcome data set. The incomplete outcome data set, by the way, means that they might have done the co-op, they might even have passed the co-op, but if they get that incomplete outcome data set, that's the one where you get dropped because you don't have that pre-post-test pair. So the drop reason would be the second most obvious. If they're missing gender, birth date, or less than 12 hours, that could also be a drop, and that would also be a reason for why they're scratched off. I'd say that's the second most obvious reason. The third most obvious reason is under, and again, these names are something here. I don't know what's up with these names. We used to have easy names, and they changed the database. For whatever reason, they changed from easy names to ridiculous names. Again, I really hate the Rolling Hills database. Every time I look at it, I hate it a little bit more. I'm not sure what people are thinking, but be that as it may, they changed it for the worse. So Lyran or whatever, Abakar, you can see Lyran got bumped because you can see Lyran took not one, not two, not three, but 4 additional assessments. Lyran did a great job and passed all 4. But you can see the 4th one is scratched off because Lyran eclipsed that 3 co-op max. That's the 3rd reason why a scratch off can occur, where Lyran eclipsed the maximum. The first 3 got counted because Lyran was right there on the right track. But once he eclipsed that maximum, he got scratched off. I'll add, you can see that 47C works for 231 just as well as it works for 243. So I'll add, you can see how Lyran got scratched off 243, but got picked up again once we looked at 231, because you can see Lyran went over the max for 243, but Lyran did not go over the max for 231, so it got picked up again. Does everybody see how that's working?
So that's the same with Timothy at the top.
It sure is.
Yeah.
It sure is.
Right.
So that's the 3rd most obvious reason. Here's the 4th, and this is the one that trips people up, is a lot of times because of logic. Like if you look at Christy Leticia, you see you've got the government and history and sit crossed off. That's just kind of a report anomaly where you can see it's calculating it correctly, where you can see over to the right under G&H and SIT, it's being recorded correctly, but there's just an anomaly where it will go through all those COAP areas. It'll not recognize it as a valid COAP, so it will scratch it off the list and then pick it up again. So sometimes that's the same thing as it could get scratched off, where I think in Jane's case, she just didn't pass. But let's just say we never imported COAP 40 or we never picked it up. It will basically scratch off COAPs that have not been imported or approved. So it's looking at the SIT and G&H as a COAP that wasn't imported as approved. That's an anomaly that we just can't get rid of without totally restructuring EL Civics payment points. So we've kind of agreed that we just have to live with this little anomaly on these reports because we don't want to spend a lot of time restructuring all the EL Civics payment points. So just know that's the in the weeds issue that some of the bean counters might call you on. If you don't want to bring it to everybody's attention, I wouldn't, but just know that somebody might try to trip you up. There's the full-throated explanation on all the ways in which learners can be scratched off here.
Hey, it's Janice. Okay, so for Christy Letitia, which I didn't notice that one before, she passed the G&H and she passed the SIT. So there's 2 earned payment points. And the 2 that had the lines through it, we're just supposed to ignore it.
Those,
because you can see, well, the way you know you can ignore it is that it got moved out of Civ Part, but then picked up again in SIT Prep all the way over to the right where we don't have the numbers listed. Where again, in SIT Prep, we have, and I think it's because it's COAPs and the SIT and the G&H are all designated by the letter C. So the letter C, you know, is showing up. That's why the detail report is picking that up. But ultimately, it gets picked up in SIT Prep, so you can see that Leticia is earning the payment points based on the past items you can see over there to the right, where there's 1 G&H and 1 SIT that's being correctly picked up. If it was not picking it up, then that would be your cue to say, yeah, it's being scratched off. The scratch off under 231 is correct, but hey, wait a minute, why the heck isn't it being picked up again in the SIT Prep area? If it's this example, it's correct, but if it wasn't, then you might scratch your head and need to do a little more follow-up.
Right. It's funny that the 973 is a S like in Sam and not a C like Charles.
Yeah.
I get it.
Okay. Anyway, so that's that one. So anything you wanted to bring up on this to-do list here, Margaret?
On the to-do list?
Yes.
It's just a summary of things they should be doing. So
okay,
hopefully
so
it's
nothing
helpful.
You really want to say here? Okay, that's fine. And then anything on the activities, again, if you're fine with it, that's okay.
Yeah, I think I'm okay. If everybody else is okay, if anybody has questions, that's fine.
Looks good to me.
All right. So
You
I'll just
think
say
it's
any
helpful for
questions.
people?
I think it's helpful whether they do it or not is the icing on the cake, I guess. I think we need to be kind of following up, like, so how many people did this, you know? And can you share what your findings were?
Okay. All right. This was helpful, Jay.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, anything else? If not, I'll let you go, and thank you. And like I said, the interruption from a few minutes ago was Jane giving me a little note saying okay, was trying to contact me on this. So I'll get off the phone and see what he wants, and hopefully it'll just be an easy one.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Okay.
All
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I'll issue an updated one as soon as we get the conclusion with Michaela then.
Great.
All right, thank you.
Sounds good,
All right,
Janice.
bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.